Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to look at how do shifts in demand and supply affect our equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So to jump right in, we'll start with the shifts in demand. We'll see what happens if we increase demand, if we decrease demand, and how those will affect price and quantity for each case. So we'll start with is an axis. We'll have price and quantity. We'll have a downward sloping demand curve, an upward sloping supply curve. We can note is our initial equilibrium will be right here where they intersect. And I kind of have that in gold. And we'll see a initial equilibrium price and initial quantity. So first, if we have an increase in demand, we'll shift our demand curve to the right up to, say, D1, which again is an increase in demand. So for this one, what we'll see happen is we'll scooch our equilibrium up to where this new demand curve meets the supply curve. And we'll move up to, say, P1, then up to Q1. So we see with this increase in demand, we have an increase in price and an increase in quantity. So that increase in demand will lead to both price and quantity to increase. Then on the opposite end, if we have a decrease, we'll shift our demand curve to the left. And we'll note this new equilibrium. Then we'll have, say, price 2 and quantity 2. We'll see happen from our initial price 2 is a decrease, and quantity 2 is a decrease. So if we have a decrease in demand, both our price and our quantity will decrease. So then when we have a shift in supply, it'll act a little bit different in how everything relates. So like always, we'll have our price and our quantity, have our demand curve going downward, supply curve going upward. And again, we want to see what happens to our equilibrium when our supply shifts. So this one, just like before, we'll note our initial price and quantity, and then work from here. So if we have an increase in supply curve will shift to the right, up to, say, S1. Remember, that's an increase. Increase is always to the right. So here we'll find this new equilibrium point, and we'll see things work a little bit different than before. So we have a Q1 and a P1. So with this increase in supply, we see that our price actually goes down, but our quantity will go up. So an increase in supply, again, leads to a fall in the price, but an increase in quantity. Then on the other side of that, if we have a decrease in supply, we'll shift it to the left to, say, S2, which again is a decrease. Then from here, we'll have a new price and quantity up to, say, P2 and Q2. And with this decrease in supply, we see that our price goes up, our quantity goes down. So down here, our price would rise and our quantity would fall. So that we have our shifts in supply and our shifts in demand, but now we want to get a little more complex and say, well, what happens if they both change? So what we'll do is we'll come down here, and we're going to suppose that we're in the oil market. We have two events happen. The first thing is that a hurricane knocks out a bunch of oil fields in Texas. The second thing is we come up on a holiday weekend. Not saying which one. Well, I'll explain why I'm not saying which one in just a moment. So in this case, we have a downward sloping demand curve and an upward sloping supply curve, just like always. Then we'll want to take note again of our equilibrium here at P star and Q star. And we're going to take, and instead of trying to do it all in one step, we're just going to take it step by step, see what happens with each event. So first thing we have happens, a hurricane knocks out some oil fields. That's going to cause a decrease in supply. So our supply will shift back to S1, and we'll have a new equilibrium right here at P1 and Q1. And what we see happen as a result of this hurricane is that our price rises and our quantity falls. So the second part of the story is that we have a holiday weekend. So that's going to increase our demand because everyone's out of work and we have a long weekend, so we may as well travel. So what we'll do is we'll move from the second equilibrium on up to where the new demand and the new supply curve meet, and we'll take note of our price and our quantity. So we have price 2 and say quantity 2. What we see happen with this increase in demand is that our price continues to jump up, but our quantity falls back in some way. So from here, we want to know what happens with our price and quantity, and the answer is going to be, it depends. So when we think about our price, we have two forces pushing the same way, which means no matter what, our price is going to go up. So we can say that with this increase in demand and decrease in supply, our price will rise. However, with quantity, you see we have these two arrows pointing against each other, and for that, it's going to depend. So do we have a big hurricane that knocks out oil production for weeks, or do we have a small hurricane that people evacuate for, then it misses? And similarly for a holiday. Is it the Labor Day holiday where, some people travel, but not everybody does? Or is it something like Thanksgiving or Christmas where everybody travels and everybody goes somewhere, knows somebody that's going somewhere? Right, so we have those two questions that come up. And it depends. So if the hurricane's a big hurricane on a small weekend, the supply is going to have the bigger edge and our quantity would go down. However, if it's a hurricane in the middle of December, suppose it just happens, so hurricane in November, December, around Thanksgiving or Christmas, and, it misses, but it's a huge travel holiday, we have a relatively small impact from the hurricane, but a big impact from the quantity. From the holiday weekend. So we'll say for our quantity is that it is ambiguous, or we can't 100% tell. So using this kind of framework, I would encourage you to go through. This was in your notes. You have 4 cases. This was actually the third case where you have this increase in demand and decrease in supply. Using the same framework and same basic idea, I encourage you, work through the other 3, see if you can figure out between price and quantity what happens to each of those scenarios. For each one of them, for either price or quantity, you will for sure be able to find one. The other one will be ambiguous. So this one, price increased, quantity was ambiguous. You may have it where price falls and quantity is ambiguous, or you may have where what happens to quantity, but the price is ambiguous. So I encourage you, take a few minutes, work through these scenarios and see what you can come up with. If you want to check and make sure you're going about it right, feel free to let me know. I'll be happy to help. Have a good day.